Ultimately, what I try to do, I try to look for themes within the parasha to see what binds them together in some cases. And happens to be that in this week's, it's a really, really good one. We have a major theme in here that really connects and put this whole thing together, not just for Chayei Sarah, but really essentially for our whole purpose in life. And we're going to see really how the life of Sarah encapsulates that, and we'll see it very, very clearly. So I want to share real quickly a quick synopsis because I kind of want to give you an overview of what the Torah portion really calls out to be. One of the first things that I want to share is the timeline. So the timeline in here, of course, is 38 years from the passing of Sarah in the biblical year 2085, okay, to the passing of Abraham in the year 2123. So this is the time frame that this is taking place. Now, interesting enough, what we have in this portion, sadly, is that Sarai dies, and Abraham dies as well, you know. And with this concludes the Abraham saga, essentially. Next week, we pick on Parashat Toldot, and now we enter into the saga of Yaakov and Esau, right? But before we can get into Parashat Toldot, something has to take place here in Chayei Sarah, which is really the central focus of the whole portion that I want to share. One of the things that I want to also share with this portion is the mitzvot that we're commanded to do that Judaism has adopted based on Tanakh principles. And I don't know if you guys noticed, but there's actually a few of them in here in this parasha that leads to Jewish halacha. For instance, we have the burial of the dead, which is a very, very big mitzvah, as we all know in Judaism. We see that in here in this mitzvah. And interesting enough, the very first marriage that we witness is in this parasha. Now, of course, we got Adam and Eve, but there's no like wedding that we can see. Here we actually have a shechut, a matchmaker, and we have an actual wedding, So this is like there's principles in here in this Torah portion that the sages have used to actually incorporate halacha in part of Jewish life and why we do what we do. Another aspect of mitzvot that we have in this portion, which is a very, very big one, of course, is consoling who? The mourner. Person who obviously someone just passed away. We're going to see some of that element in this parsha as well. Amen. So Sarah dies at 127, right? And this is the synopsis. She is buried in the cave of Machpelah, which is in Hebron. Abraham purchases this from Ephron, the Hittite, for an enormous amount of 400 shekels, right? He overpaid for it in essence. Abraham's servant Eliezer is sent to Haran to find a wife for Isaac. That's another thing that we see here. Eliezer asks God for a sign. When the maids come into the town to draw water, right, from the well, he will ask for some water to drink. The woman who will not give him the drink but will offer to draw water for his camel shall be the one destined to be his master's son. Rebekah, the daughter of Abraham's nephew Bethuel, appears at the well and responds with the show of benevolence that we see here towards Eliezer. Eliezer is invited to their home where he repeats the same exact story verbatim at the house. Interesting. We'll touch up a little bit on that. Rebekah returns with Eliezer to the land of Canaan and encounters Isaac praying in the field. Isaac marries Rebekah, loves her, is comforted over her for the loss of his mother. We finalize this portion with Abraham then takes a new wife, Keturah, and fathers 6 additional children, but Isaac is designated as the heir, of course. Abraham dies at 175 and is buried beside Sarah at the cave of Machpelah. The parasha concludes with a chronicle of the descendants of Ishmael in his lifespan. Wow. Sarah dies. The parasha opens with the death of Sarah, sort of, because the parasha is actually titled The Life of Sarah, right? But then it concludes with what? The chronicles of the descendants of Ishmael. We're missing something here, right? We're going to hopefully try to tie this on together. It's not the easiest portion to bring. Hopefully, you extend a little mercy to me, right? Baruch Hashem. And we'll see what we can dig from our beloved sages and what we can draw from here into this parasha. So the parasha is titled what? Chayei Sarah. Thank you. Just make sure you guys are awake. I need some coffee. Go grab some coffee, please. Do something. Do jumping jacks. But Chayei Sarah. And what's interesting is that the word for life in here is what? Chai, right? Now, I want to share something in here that Ibn Caspi shares in concerning this word. Why is it that the word for life in Hebrew is plural? There's no such thing in Hebrew word for life singular. Much like the word water, mayim. There's no singular word in Hebrew for the word water. Interesting, right? I don't know either. But we're going to share in here what our beloved sages have to say about this, and this is what's so beautiful. So it says in here, Caspi says that the Hebrew word for life, chaim, always comes in the plural form, similar to the word water, mayim. For just as water is fluid and constantly changing, key word, just as water is always fluid, right? It's always moving. I mean, even when it's stagnant, it's still kind of moving, right? So that one speaks not of a singular water, but always of many particles flowing in succession, so is human being for as long as they live. Meaning, what the rabbis are teaching us in here, that the word for chai, which is life, because it's about the life of Sarah, right? But rather that life really is only when we are always what? Aspiring for greatness. We're always moving. We're always changing. What happens when you stop? What happens? You die. Now, let's take this a little further. In your faith, folks, you should always be high. You should always be moving. You should always be striving for better. You should always be, again, never boring by no means, but always moving, right? Because what happens when your faith stops? What happens when you stop learning? What happens when you shut the door for any type of, I don't know, information that is valuable for your faith and for your growth, for your spiritual growth? What happens when we put those blocks? The water becomes more like a retention pond now. A retention pond is not mein chaim, it's not moving. And what happens with your faith? In the same way with a human. Now, I want to bring this to a level that we can all understand it here, hopefully. Your faith will die, essentially. Now, it's interesting that in the human body, just think of the human body, the human anatomy. What happens when you become the greatest couch potato? Right? Let's bring it home. Let's just bring it home. What happens when you live a life that is not really proactive, or active in this case, right? What happens? You gain weight, your blood sugar goes up, your cholesterol level goes up, your health decays, and then ultimately what it leads to is mut, death. It makes sense. How the Hebrew really expounds so much. We can take this to a level where we can understand. Listen, living a sedentary lifestyle is not good. You have to be active. Because if you're not moving, you're dying. You see? And I want you to really, this could be the teaching we can conclude it today. But this is something to really, really take it in. Your faith in the same way. This should be a reflection. What's internal should be a reflection of the things they do outside. I should be able to see what's inside of you. So if you're a person that's a slob and a couch potato, more than likely that's what's inside of you. See? So, again, it's food for thought. We want to see and hear the life of Sarah, but it's interesting. It talks about the life of Sarah, but yet we hear that she dies. Let me ask you a question. How often does the Tanakh really speak about Sarai? I mean, we know about Abraham, right? But really, in the Tanakh, there's not really much about Sarai. She's kind of tagging along. We know that she gets hijacked, you know what I mean? In Egypt, and then later, I think, Abimelech as well, you know what I mean? But other than that, we know she goes with Abraham, right? We know through our beloved sages that she was very, very active in obviously proselytizing with the women to try to get them to come to know the one true God, right? In a world that completely rejected that any type of theology that was, again, one God was really, really sacrilege. But other than that, there's nothing much about Sarai that we can read about, like her persona and who she was, her character. This is why this portion, I believe, is titled Chayei Sarah, because we're going to learn more about Sarah in this portion that we have since Lech Lecha started. Let's put it that way. And it's really the encompassing of her life. And this is what's going to, I'm hoping that this truly is a blessing for each and one of you as we navigate through this portion. What I want to focus today, primarily, which will tie into Sarah, this portion actually has 105 verses. This Torah portion alone. There's 105 verses, starting with Chayei Sarah and ending with the descendants of Ishmael. Out of the 105 verses, 67 verses out of the 105 deal directly, exclusively with finding a bride for Isaac. The central focus, death or the life of Sarah, finding a wife for Isaac, and then the concluding factor, Abraham dies, of course, and then we have Ishmael and his descendants. But the big portion has to do with finding the bride. Now, I want to zero in that in today because I think that there's so much in this alone that we can feed off that will give us purpose, I believe, in our daily lives and in our faith. One of the biggest purpose in here that we see, that we're gonna encounter in here, that has to do with what we're passing on to the next generation. That's so vital. Verse 24 opens up by saying that Abraham was old, coming in days, it says. Right off the bat. There's a message in here. Ve'avraham zachen ba yamim, it says. That terminology of ba yamim is actually used also exclusively in Genesis 18, I believe. And we're going to see really what it's saying in here, because it's not just saying that Abraham was old, coming in days. I mean, on the surface, when we read this, it's almost as if, it's kind of like a no-brainer. Abraham is just getting old, right? If we go to Genesis 18:11, the same terminology is used. Now, the sages use Hebrew to see really how words repeat themselves exclusively throughout the Torah portion to be able to bring a drash, to expound more on what's happening in here. Verse 11 says, Ve'avraham ve'Sarah zekenim ba'in ba yamim. There it is again. And it says, now Abraham and Sarah were old, well on their years. We read it here in Genesis 18:11 as well. I was right about that, 18. So I want to share a little bit about the Kli Yakar has to say about that when it talks about was old, coming in days. It says, for the materialist, the days of youth shine brightest, right? As these supply the physical gratifications which comprise the entire goal in life. Whereas old age, when the nectar of the corporal turns elusive, marks a descent into a night of darkness and despair. But with the righteous, the reverse is true. To grow old is to come into the days of their lives, into its most sunlit, enlightened phase, since the sagacity and wisdom that comes with old age is the greatest joy. And this is why it's talking about they're coming in their days. And again, we read this in and 18 as well, which again, we're talking many years in differences. So it's not so much about the fact that they're getting old. The Torah is not emphasizing the fact that they're getting old, but rather it's emphasizing more that they are becoming more fulfilled in their calling and the wisdom that is coming with that as well. I want to share some things in here from the Zohar as well. When a person is born, all their days are already in existence, and these days await that the person shall fill them with good deeds. If the person is righteous, their days become garments of glory, in which their soul is clothed. Thus it is said with Abraham that he was old and coming of days. For Abraham merited to arrive at the end of his life fully vested in his days, and his soul did not lack anything. The Yosef Lubavitch says, a person, and I like what he says in here, a person's true age is not determined by the numbers written in their passport. One may be old in physical years, but still be young like a child spiritually. Is that true? Nachon. Right? For the only days a person truly possesses are those which they utilize for a godly purpose. This is powerful. See, this is why I was talking about the Ba'ayim, that is talking about the days that they were coming, is that their days were being really fulfilled at this point. The wisdom that they had and their purpose for life was amazing. The Rebbe says, old means that a person has lived a certain number of years, but it does not say how those years were lived. Coming in days describes a person who enters into their days, who is invested and deeply involved in the events of their lives. That's amazing. You know, it goes back to Chayei. What is Chayei? Always constantly life, but why is it plural? Because it's constantly evolving, it's constantly moving. You know, normally, I don't know if, you know, and maybe you can correct me later if I'm wrong, but many people, when they come to a certain age, it's almost as if they give up on life. I don't care about anything anymore. You know, after all, I'm going to be dead in a couple of years. Who knows? You know, right? And you kind of get that attitude, you know. This is what the Torah is actually saying the opposite of. That even as we grow older, we should be just as involved with life, just as involved with the community, just as involved with our faith to continue to grow, because this is essentially what we have. What's happening is we're leaving a legacy behind. Now, this portion really has a lot to do with the legacy. What legacy are you leaving behind once you pass away? And this is what I really truly appreciate in here, what it said. So, it says in here, and God blessed Abraham with everything, right? And Abraham said to his servant, the elder of his house, says, Ve'adonai berach et Abraham bechol, vayomer Abraham el avdo zachen beito, ha-moshel bechol asher lo, it says. And this is really amazing. You know, this is what the Torah, I love the Torah because it's just a little nuggets in here. Here now, Abraham turns after his days are fulfilled, and he's really fulfilled, right? He's still very active in what he's doing, meaning he's still making converts. He's still trying to get the people to acknowledge the one true God, even though he's old. Doesn't stop him from doing what he's supposed to do, right? Now it says in here that Hashem berach et Abraham bechol, with everything, right? And Abraham said to his servants, Vayomer Abraham el avdo zachen beito. Now, it's interesting. The servant in here doesn't say who his name is. Now, I'm going to submit to you, do your homework, and you'll see, in this portion, the name Eliezer never appears once. It's just the servant. That's it. The one who is faithful in Abraham's household. It never says is Eliezer. The rabbis conclude that it's Eleazar because that's the right-hand man of Abraham, which is true. The point is, I'm not trying to discredit that. I'm going somewhere with this. Why is it that the name is not mentioned, though? For what? Oh. Oy, 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 oy. Very, very good. Chokhmah. I love it. Yes. Baruch Hashem. I personally believe it's left there so that you can insert your name in there. Because here's the thing, it's about the house of Abraham. That's why it says the Avdo Zachen. But here's the key with this, though. The servant, he's an Avdo, right? Which is Avat, the servant. But he's also a Zechan, which is an elder, right? Now, in our translation, really the context in here, how it puts it is that he's just an old man as well. Both of them are old. But in reality, the Zachen, although it can mean old, generally speaking, it means someone who has learned. That's why we had the Chachaim and the Zachim. These are men who are gray hair, who have put in the time, who study the Torah, who are giving their life to Hashem, basically, to God. So they're basically a sage. You know, when we talk about the sages, we're talking about the Zachim. See? So what's happening in here, really? I want you to really think. Think outside of the box today. It's going to be beautiful. Okay? Abraham is concerned at this point. He has Isaac left. Now, I'm going to submit to you in here, and we're going to see with collaboration of our sages, that the whole future of the Jewish history lies in the hand of this servant in the story. Meaning, if the servant fails in this job or chooses not to do it, there will be no such thing as a Yehudi today. There will not be such thing as Israel today. There will be no such thing as a land today. Like everything is at stake at this very moment. Now, I want to share something with you because this is so important. Yahudut is so important. This marriage that's going to take place in here is going to be the determining factor of not whether we will have a nation or not. Everything that Abraham and Sarai have worked up to this point, remember, we're talking about the life of Sarah. Okay? And the things that you have done, we're going to see that later on and how it comes manifest through Rebecca. But the idea is everything that they work for is built for one purpose. One single purpose and one purpose only. And it is to bring. Remember what was when the parasha started? Because we're ending the story of Abraham, right, today. But the story of Abraham actually starts with a promise. That promise is that if he were to leave everything behind, if he were to leave, by the way, his father's house, okay, that's why it says in here that this servant, he's a servant in Abraham's house. It's not just talking about the location or the structure. It's talking about the teachings that come along with it as well. The doctrine, the faith, everything that encompasses the household. So Abraham has to left everything behind for a promise, because in Genesis chapter 12, it is explicitly says that in you all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Abraham now has such a purpose in life. It's not just about getting by every day. It's not just about paying my mortgage every day. It's just not about paying the light bill every day. You know, it's not about the donkeys and the animals that he has. Well, these are things that are important, but his main goal right now is the promise that God gave him in Genesis chapter 12. And that is that through him, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. How is that going to happen? That's a good question. How is God going to implement that? A couple things that we need to ask ourselves in this parasha, which I will ask now and I'll answer later. Why can Isaac go to find his own wife? I mean, after all, next portion we're going to read that Jacob is allowed to go. But why is it that Isaac can't go? Isaac cannot go under any circumstance. Isaac cannot leave the Holy Land. Do you know the answer to this? Well, we'll figure it out later. But let's continue. I want you to think about that as we're going along. Because now we have the shechut. Now we have the matchmaker. Matchmaker, matchmaker, send me a match. Where does the matchmaker come? This is right here, folks. This is the idea of having a matchmaker. It starts right here in this portion. This is what I'm saying. These are new implements that we see from mitzvot. Like if you ever wonder, what did the Jews come up with this whole matchmaking business? Right here. Okay, and we see much of this later on. But it says in here that he is an avdo zachen beito, in his house. He is a servant in his house. He is an elder. He is one who has learned. He is one who can discern. He is one who is following the teachings of Abraham in the household of Abraham. Are you getting this? You see, we're starting to explore more in the story. This is not just by some old guy who happens to be the right-hand man. That's it, and he's just going on behalf of Abraham. No, there's something much more in here because the words that are used gives us the insight. What's happening in here? Abraham is not just sending anybody. Abraham is sending a scholar. He wants to make sure that when he goes out that way to find his bride, that the measure that he's going to be using is going to be an accurate one. They will fit what? What are we fitting in here? Who does this lady need to match? Sarah. See, in order for this to continue to flow, remember we talk about Chaim, life, advancing, increasing, moving, transforming, you have to have the right ingredients. It's almost like baking a cake, right? Never baked one in my life. But I hear that it's a science, okay? I hear that it's a science, right? And you have to have the proper ingredients for it to come out perfect. Is what's happening in this Torah portion right now. See, the whole aspect in here now is we're going to learn through Sarah, we're going to learn who really Sarah was to the character of Rebecca. And we're going to see really how beautiful this is and how amazing it is. So it says in here that the servant is going to, he who is the elder, is going to ha-moshel bechol asher lo, who rule all which is his, it says. What does that mean? I mean, if you really read about this in here, you really read it, it makes no sense. Like, who's the his? Rule that it all is his, like Abraham, or rule all that is his that is his? Well, who is the his in here? What does that mean? Anyways, I want to share something very amazing. This is going to hopefully blow your mind, right? I want to share in here something that's really, really amazing. In the Talmud, it says, this is Eliezer, of course, because the Tanakh doesn't tell you who it is, okay? This is Eliezer, who was an elder in Torah learning, who mastered the teaching of his master and transmitted it to others. Rabbi Eitz Yosef says that Eliezer resembled Abraham in appearance and character. And like Abraham, he ruled all which is his. Listen to this. It's not talking about him ruling the stuff of Abraham. It's talking about that Eliezer ruled everything that was his. And it's still the question of what is his. He had attained mastery over his own inclinations. Wow. Amazing, isn't it? Mamashkalam. This is what this is all about. See, this is why it's a zaken. A zaken, is it making sense? See, we're going to start reading this opening in a whole different perspective, which makes sense. Contextually speaking, makes sense. Why? Because he is the shachen. He's the one who's going to be the matchmaker. He's the one who's going to go out there. He's the one that Abraham is entrusting to do these things. Right? We have another layer that we're going to uncover here, but not just yet. This is, I really want you to get this and grasp it, so now you can see when we take this to a whole different level, how like, wow, it's gonna be really good, I hope. Says, the Kli Yakar says, a person who rules their own inclination is the ruler of all which is his. In the literal sense as well, they are the master of their material possessions. Not so those who lust for money dictates their every action, so that their possession effectively ruled them. In other words, money rules them instead of you ruling the money. Thus, Abraham could place his trust in this Eleazar guy, knowing that he would not be swayed from the proper course of action by bribes of gifts. Now, this, at a very basic level, this makes sense, right? But I want to take this to a higher level, because the servant in here cannot be moved by bribes. The servant in here has to be trained in the house of Abraham, by the way. Okay? But here's a key factor. The nation of Israel is known as a servant of Hashem. I want you to think about this, and let's go outside the box. Let's fly, shall we? The nation is an Abdu in essence. And as a servant, here, what is the difference between a servant and a self-willed person? Servant doesn't ask questions. A servant doesn't say, well, I'm only willing to do it, but only if you give me explanation as to why I'm doing what I'm doing. A servant is at 100% at the will of his master. That was Eleazar. Eleazar, I will submit to you, is a representation of the nation of Israel. Why? Because what is the purpose of the nation of Israel? To bring the Torah to the whole world. In essence, think about this. Eleazar, as the nation of Israel, is going to look for a bride. Right? The people. But these people, this bride has to be one who what? Who fits the qualifications. And what are these qualifications? Well, these are the qualifications that comes with the house of Abraham. This is really, really beautiful. I know it's maybe a little bit too much out there, but think about this for a minute. Because the word servant is used so much in the Bible, specifically with the nation of Israel. Their whole role is to be servants of God. Now, what's the difference? Folks, this is where it gets complicated. You can love God with all your heart, with all your might, and all your soul. That doesn't mean that you want to be a servant of God. Whole different story. What is the difference between a servant? A servant does whatever the master says, period. A servant doesn't ask questions. A servant says, I'm here to serve you. And if this is your household, we can remember, we're talking about the household of Abraham. That's what it says in here. A servant who was a zachen in his household. Beitoch, specifically. Eleazar qualifies for the servant now in this role to go to find a bride, in essence. These are things that we need to think about, folks. Are we really truly wanting to serve Hashem? And listen, this is no condemnation. You don't want to be a servant, that's fine. There's levels, and I'm going to share more with this with you and with our sages right on this. Different levels of this. But to truly be an avdo, to really be that servant, that's why the servant suffers in Isaiah 53. We read through this, the nation of Israel. It's part of it, folks. Why? Because the nation is in exile. Now, it's interesting that Eleazar is going out of the Holy Land, in this case, to the exile. For what purpose in the exile? To find all those who really, truly love Hashem, who want to be a servant. In this case, it's going to be who? Rebecca. There's going to be a test for this. We read about the test in here. I don't want to get too much in here. Let's continue in here so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay? He says, Simna yadcha tachat yirechi. Now he's going to place his hand to make a vow to Abraham. He's going to fulfill this vow. This goes and coincides what we do in vows in Judaism. How do we make a vow in Judaism? We place our hands over tefillin. We place our hand over mezuzah. We place our hand on things that are holy, covenantal in essence. In this case in here, we're not talking about the tefillins. We're not talking about mezuzahs yet because none of this is really kind of active at this point. But what do we have that is active at this point? We have the milah, circumcision. See, this is the milah. So he's going to make this vow with the milah to tell him, I'm going to do this, I'm going to vow to this, because the milah is something that is holy. You know, it is a covenant between Hashem and you, essentially. Again, this is why I'm saying much of this today, the things that we practice today, really have a root in Tanakh, is the essence. And he now swears that this is what's going to take place, that he is going to, in effect, I want to read it because I really don't want to paraphrase this. And I will make you swear by God, the God of heavens and the God of earth, that you would take a wife from my son, from the daughters of the Canaanites within whom I reside. But my land and to my birthplace you shall go, and take a wife from my son Isaac. And the servant said to him, perhaps the woman will not want to go after me to this land. Should I return your son to the land from which you went out? Eleazar is saying in here, listen, if she doesn't want to come, I'm just going to bring your son over there. Because, I don't know, maybe if your son is there, be easier, you know what I mean? Like he's there. And what he says in here is, Abraham said to him, be aware of yourself, lest you return my son there. Now, I'm going to ask that question I said earlier. Why is it that Isaac cannot go out of the land? Any thoughts? Very good. Cannot just leave. Exactly. You guys remember the binding of Isaac, the Akedah, right? That right there signifies something. This is the reason why Isaac cannot leave. And we're going to see really something very interesting that the rabbis share about that. And it's really, really mind-blowing. I think it's amazing. But one of the things that we see in here, according to Midrash Rabbah Rashi, is that because he was offered as a somewhat of a sacrifice offering, right? Living in this case, not dead. This is the reason why, in this essence, he cannot go. But it also shares something different in here. They were in Canaan, right? Well, the Canaanites they're not really great people, at least morally speaking, right? Let me ask you a question. Where Abraham came from, how is that much better? I mean, after all, the reason why he left is because all the idol worship that took place in the land. And it's not technically a holy land. So the people who are there are idol worshipers, essentially. So, why go there is the point. Well, really, it kind of reveals how really decrepit the Canaanites were, to be honest with you. Seriously. It was so bad that he will I'll take my chances with going back to my father's house to find somebody there than to take a chance with these Canaanites, in essence. You know what I mean? So that kind of gives you an insight. What is it that Abraham and Sarah was surrounded with? How demoralized was that society at that point? Yet, they kept faithful to Hashem. What's that proof? Doesn't matter where you are in the exile. I don't care if you are in Harlem or in the Bronx or in East LA. It doesn't matter how decrepit the neighborhood is. You can always walk in holiness no matter where you're at. Your surroundings makes no difference. And here we see the Canaanites were horrible. So bad that they went to this point. Now, I want to bring up another point in here. This wife that he is going to acquire, by the way, at this very point at least, at this very point in history, it's not necessarily an observant woman. She's not observant. She's not Jewish. She's not practicing any of these things. She's in the house of who? Laban. This is a house of idol worship. This is the reason why, I'm making my point in here. Why Abraham left, but yet he's going back there. Like, why go back to that? Well, for one, we see that, okay, the Canaanites were really bad, right? But it shares a light on something else in this shechut, in this aspect of marriage. And you're speaking from strictly from a halachic and a biblical sense, okay? It wasn't really so much about the bloodline of Rebecca at this point. But what is it that he was looking for in Rebecca? Was it a blood? Let me see a blood test, Rebecca, and see where you're really from. I mean, let's speak reality here. She by no means qualified at this point because she's really technically not a Yehudit. This concept doesn't even exist at this point. It's forming but doesn't exist at this point. But the basis for it still stands. What is it about her that he was looking for? Well, starting with virtues. Starting with that. Because you see, if you can have virtues, if you can have moral values, right? And they're good, from there is the basis for everything else. You see? That's the foundation. See, we can work with that. You have foundation. The Canaanites don't even have that foundation. And by the way, probably a good portion of the women living with Laban in that area didn't have that either. Like I said, it's pretty much all the same. But there was a chance in his household. There was still a chance in here. Remember, Abraham came out of that land, and for years and years, all he did was what? Profess the God of Israel and the oneness of Israel. Something stuck to somebody, hopefully, right? And we see that possibility something did stick with somebody. And this is why he's taking the chance and sending them back to his homeland, because there's at least an aspect that could possibly exist after he spent so many years there. And this is what we see in here. So he cannot go again because he's an all-out offering. And I want to share something in here. And we see this later in 26:2, chapter 26:2. And in 26:2 says, I'm going to start with one. And there was a famine in the land aside from the first famine, which was in the days of Abraham, which we're reading now. And Isaac went to Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, to Gerar. And God appeared to him and said to him, do not go down to Egypt. Dwell in the land which I will show you. Right? Which I will say to you in this land. So here he is told, not by God, he is telling him, don't go down to Egypt. We see that God is truly trying to preserve Isaac to make sure that he stays in Canaan, no matter what, at all cost, essentially. And like we have expressed here today, it has a lot to do with him being the all offering. It says in here, Rashi in the Midrash Rabbah, based on 26:2 says, Isaac was planning to do as his father had done before under the same circumstances, but God said to him, you are a sacred ascent offering brought upon the altar, and as such you must remain in this holy land. Now, I love this. This is really, particularly really amazing. The Rebbe has a drash in here concerning this mind-blowing. The aspect of why Isaac remains in the land, right? And others are sent like Yaakov and whatnot. Beautiful. If you give me the opportunity, I would love to be able to share this with you now. First of all, I want to start with, it says in here, Abraham served God by wandering. What's the difference between Isaac and Abraham? Abraham served God by wandering from land to land. That was Abraham. That's why he did a lech lecha. He was called to go out, and Abraham goes everywhere. He doesn't stay put in one place, right? So it says in here that Abraham served God by wandering from land to land and gathering the sparks of holiness scattered there, in essence. But Isaac was told that it's not your role. You as your father has achieved this for you. You remain where you are and elevate the sparks of your father that are gathered. Now the Rebbe says, the mission of Israel, here's where it gets really good. The mission of Israel, the nation of Israel, is to serve as a light to the nations. right? That's this all. We see this in the prophecy. The Navuah speaks a lot about this. This is very, very prominent. But there are two ways to achieve this, it says. Number one, by venturing out to engage and influence those who are still outside of the realm of holiness. So, saying one way to do this is to go out into the exile. I'm paraphrasing now here what he's saying. Instead of staying in your little holy land, in your Beit Knesset, in your little circle, one way to do this is you need to go out. Because guess what? If you don't go out, the fish ain't going to come to you. All right? You need to go out there and fish and bring the fish in. That's one way. The second says, by perfecting and sanctifying one's own life so that all are inspired by the example and drawn to the divine truth. So two ways is you go out. The other way is you sanctify your life so much, meaning you're doing introspection. You're doing musar, basically. You're building character that is godly, that is good. And by doing that, now you are like this beacon of light that everybody, it just wants to come to you. You know, kind of like attracts, right? Light attracts people. So that's the idea. So Abraham exemplified the first approach, which was you need to go out and gather the people. You need to go to the lowliest place of the world and gather the people in essence. Isaac is the second. That's why Isaac stays in Israel. Okay? Isaac, on the other hand, on the individual level, every Jew is a child of both Abraham and Isaac, charged and empowered to incorporate both approaches into their life. On the macro historical level, the exile of the Jewish people is the purpose for bringing godliness to the world, in essence. Why is it, the sages teach us, that why is it that Hashem scattered the nation of Israel? Well, first of all, because of the disobedience, right? But the purpose, the real purpose was so that they can make converts. Because when the nation is scattered everywhere, guess what? Now you're going to bring people back home with you. It's a genius plan. You know, it's a strike of genius, let me tell you. God truly is a genius. So I'm going to punish you because you've been disobedient, but in the process, I'm going to use you to bring people into the fold. You know, you knock 1,000 birds with one stone. That's what God does. That's beautiful. So it says in here, again, let me repeat this. On the macro historical level, the exile of the Jewish people is for the purpose of bringing godliness into the world. In the matter of Abraham and the Messianic age is when Isaac's model, now the Messianic age, when Isaac's model of an epicenter of holiness to which all are attracted will be fully realized. This is why it says in the Nevuah specifically speaks of what? All the nations will know God from one another to the other. All the nations will come up to Jerusalem. You see what I mean? This is what he's saying. This is the epicenter of Isaac. See? Because Isaac is the one who stays, who's sanctified. Abraham is the one who goes out. See? Abraham is the one who rolls his sleeve and says, let's get dirty and let's go out there and do the work. See? Isaac, but you still have to have your Isaacs. You need to have your people who are doing self-introspection, who are in those Beit Knesset, who are in those quarters, who don't leave those quarters, who are in the Beit Midrashes, in the yeshivas, who don't go out of that. You need that. You still need that. But you also need your Abrahams. See? You need the balance of both today to bring about what? The Rebeccas. See? This is where it's all leading, because we're looking for Rebecca now. That's the whole idea. We're searching for Rebecca for who? For Isaac. Am I boring you yet? No? Oh Hashem. Oh Hashem. So now we see in here that he says to do this. Isaac can, obviously we know that Isaac cannot go because of this. And this whole aspect on here is all centered in looking for this bride who obviously is going to befit that character for Isaac. And Abraham said, beware for yourselves, lest you return to my son there, God, the God of the heavens, who has taken me from the house of my father and from the land of my birth, and who spoke to me and who has sworn to me to say, to your seed I will give this land. See? This is the whole purpose of Abraham's life. Abraham's life is all about this. How can we reach to that goal? Abraham knows that we haven't reached there yet. Still a lot of work to be done. And it takes a servant like Eleazar to make this happen. See? He will send his angel before you, and you will take a wife for my son from there. And if the woman will not want to go after you, then you will be clean from this oath of mine. Only my son do not return there. And the servant placed his hand on the thigh of his master Abraham, and he swore to him on this matter. And it says that the servant took the 10 camels and his master's camels and went in all the good of his hands. Now, I want to zero in on that real quickly. It says that he took everything that was what? That all that was good in his hand. All the good of his master in his hand. What was the good in his master's hand? Is the question. And the way this is really phrased in Hebrew doesn't quite make sense. Now, you're probably thinking, well, the silver and the gold. Naturally, right? Makes sense. Let's see this. I want to expound in here what Midrash Rabbah Rashi says. All the good of his master in his hand. Eleazar carried a document in which Abraham deeded all that he possessed to Isaac, so that they should be eager to send their daughter. As Eleazar says to Rebekah's family, he will give him all which is his, right? And Kli Yakar says this refers to the ring and the bracelets Eleazar gave to Rebekah as well, representing all the good of his master, meaning, i.e., the Torah. This is where it gets really good. Eleazar carried the entire future of Israel in his hands. That's why it says all the value that's in his hands. You getting this? This is not just about a gold ring and a bracelet. This carries much, much deeper. What he's carrying in his hand in here is the essence of the Torah, but also the entire future of Israel is on the hands of this servant. I will submit to you today is one and the same. The entire future of the nation of Israel lies in your hands, in the things that we're doing today. Because where are you now? You're not in Canaan. You're not in the Holy Land, at least not yet. You're in the exile. Where is he going? He's going to the exile. What is he carrying in his hand? The Torah. The Torah, in essence. How is it that you conclude this is the Torah? How does the sages conclude this? I want to share a little bit more on this. In actuality, 24:22, hold on one second. In 24:22, it talks about, it says, and it was when the camels had finished to drink that the man took a gold nose ring, and a half shekel its weight, and 2 bracelets upon her hands, 10 shekels of gold, that was their weight, right? That's what this says in chapter 24, verse 22 of the Torah, right? Well, let's expound a little bit more on that, if I may. The half shekel and its weight, okay, states in here, according to the Targum, Rashi, alluding to the annual half shekel per head, which Rebekah's descendants will contribute towards the service of the sanctuary in the future. Imagine that. This is why I weight the half shekel. You know what I mean? But in the 2 bracelets, 10 shekels of gold, their weight, alluding to the pair of tablets inscribed in the 10 Commandments as well. So there's a connection to the Torah in here. You see? The Maharal continues with this, and the Maharal says, our sages have said, the world stands on 3 things. I love the Maharal. 3 things. What is the 3 things that the world stands on? The Torah, right? Service of God, and acts of kindness. Now, I want you to please pay attention. The world stands on three things. If one of them is missing, it can't stand. I don't know anybody that can sit on a three-legged chair. Just joking. But you're getting this, right? So this is the whole point. If one is missing, it's going to topple, right? So, if we have the Torah, well, Baruch Hashem, we have the Torah. But remember that we said that Eleazar is an Avdol, just like the nation of Israel is an Avdol. What happens if we don't have the service of God? Clue, we miss. But what about if we have the service of God and we have the Torah, but we don't have acts of kindness? We fold. See? What is the purpose in here, folks? What I'm trying to tell you is we need to learn to balance those within our lives. We can't say, well, I have great kindness, therefore I don't have to really do service of God. Meaning, service of God, folks, has nothing to do with you being kind. You can go feed every hungry person out there today, and that will fall under acts of kindness, not service of God. We got to confuse, and to a degree the church confuses us, because it's all interlap into one thing. Service of God means that you are following his commandments, you're following his statutes, you're following all these things without sitting in here and throwing a fit over it. Because that's not what a servant does. A servant just does the will of the master. And remember, which house we're working for? Abraham's house. See? So, but then if you don't have the Torah, same thing. Well, forget about service of God. You can't have service of God without the Torah. Because then your service is in vanity. It's your own service. It's not the service of Hashem. So you have to have the service that is based on the Torah. So when Israel is called a servant, please understand, what do you mean that Israel is a servant? Is that Israel, in essence, is the one who's going to play the role of the Kohanim. What are the Kohanim? The priests. And what was the priest known as? Servants of God. Hopefully this is making sense. You can learn to separate these things. So you feeding the hungry, it's thumbs up. It's a good thing. We need to have these mitzvot. This is good. But Hashem wants us to incorporate balance too. It's not just all about doing act of kindness. You also have to have servitude. You also have to have the Torah. You have to have all these things to make it complete. Make sense? So the Maharaj says that the world stands in Torah, service of God, and of kindness. Eleazar saw that Rebekah exemplified the acts of kindness, so he alluded to the other two pillars, the service of God, represented by the half shekel, servitude in the temple, and the Torah by the two bracelets, that she should possess all three in essence. See? So by giving her that, it was as if he was completing her in essence. Because she already had the acts of kindness. And she said, yes. Eleazar is alluding to the fact that man and woman are two halves in a single body. Pay attention to this. This is very important. Men and women are essentially two halves in a single body. And the objective of marriage is to what? To actualize their primal unity. Do you all hear that? Right? Nachon? This was also the significance of the half shekel each Jew gave in the temple. See, the half shekel and the marriage goes beautifully together. What was the purpose of the half shekel in the temple? To emphasize that each individual amounts to but half a body, so that only by uniting with a fellow do we achieve wholeness. You give your half, I give my half, we make a whole. In a marriage, it's the same thing, right? She gives you half, you give your half, you become a whole. This is what's happening in here in essence. It's just mind-blowing. It's good. It's really, really good. And this that I just quoted is actually coming from the Chidah as well. So back to here. So now that we have this aspect of the Torah, bringing this to Rebekah, what happens is Like anything else, folks, whenever there's something great taking place, what happens? The klipa, the Yetzer Hara, all of that comes into play, right? I was reading something on the Maharal this morning that states man has the will to serve his creator 24/7. If you were to ask anybody who fears Hashem, they would tell you, I want to give my all to God. I can't think of a person who wouldn't. But what happens? Then comes the Yetzer Hara. We're in this body. Then comes this kingdom, the reality of the rules of this nation. And that suppresses, unfortunately, suppresses our will to serve God. You see what I mean? Like it's there in us, but there's this block that stops us. And that is, they say, the rulers of the nations, of course, because we're in foreign nation, and the Yetzer Hara. Those are two things that we have to fight every single day. We have to fight our own inclination, that voice that tells us, then we have to fight what society is telling us, and that, in essence, suppresses that will to really, really want to give our lives wholly, completely to Hashem. How awesome if we can overcome that, right? How awesome if we could. And there is a way that we could. Does it take effort? Does it take time? Does it take work? Yes, lots of work, but it can be done. And Hashem says, by doing this, we will be rewarded for the work that we do. Even if we don't reach the goal, we're rewarded for the work that we're doing. That's the key element on this. So what happens is now Laban is saying, well, wait a minute, not too fast. Maybe we can wait another year before she leaves. Right? You guys remember that in the conversation? And Eleazar's like, no, we're not waiting a year, dude. We need to go now. You know what I mean? And this is the whole aspect of Hashechut. When Hashem puts these things in your heart, when you see the emet, when you see the truth of the Torah, when you know that this is good, why are you going to say, well, I'll get to the mitzvah next year? Oh, I'll do it next month. Oh, we have to have kavanah. I see it. I recognize it. Let's do it. No, don't wait. That's procrastination. That puts a stop to the fire, by the way. If you know it's good and you're on fire, kick it into 7th gear. Don't go back to first. Seriously, let's go. Let's roll. It's kind of like, like a car. You're going. Okay, you really got to continue going because you're going up the hill, and if you don't really hit that gas pedal, you're going to back to the ground. See? The momentum. Don't ever stop the momentum. Momentum is, it's hard enough to get momentum. When you have it, don't stop. Here it is. This is what's happening in here. This is the moment that the whole future of the nation of Israel is at the hand of this servant, who is also the servant, who is also a zachin. He recognizes things. He sees in here that there is a klipa that's trying to stop this from happening. And what does he do? He said, no, we're going to do this now. But most importantly, this could have never happened if Rebecca would not agree. What happens in the story? They ask her, will you go with this man? And what does she say? I will. See? After overcoming the whole let's wait, now here's another test, sort of to speak. Will you do this? Absolutely. And what happens after that is something that is mind-blowing. And that is the blessing that they give her. It is literally the same blessing that was given to Abraham in the beginning of Genesis chapter 12. May you be a mother of thousands. May you conquer your enemy's gates. It's beautiful. And, all that stopping, and then they release this blessing. And that's exactly what happens in our lives. There's this klipa that holds us back, that keeps holding us back. And when we overcome and we push through, the blessings flow. Another aspect that I want to bring in here of this parsha is the importance of really finding the right mate. Cannot stress that, folks. You know, this is where in here, I continue to repeat this, it's not so much about the bloodline as it is about the faith. See, because Rebecca, again, at this point, she's a mutt in many ways. You know what I mean? Kind of like Abraham. He's somewhat of a mutt, too. It's not about so much the bloodline. Abraham didn't come from this pure bloodline, okay? But the idea in here is about their faith. We have to find partners, folks. And I say this more for the future generation. This is what, let me tell you, Klipa, man. Tagi. This is so important. Hear me out. Here's where we have a challenge. I want to say this in a way that don't offend anybody. But here's the challenge. You cannot be in between homes for too long. I'm going to explain what I mean. Okay? Here, the whole perspective is that the bride that Eliezer is seeking for Isaac holds in the hands of Israel, the nation. It means the survival of what? The culture and the faith of the nation of Israel. Yes, it comes with a culture. Yes, it comes with a faith. If you're not tied in or yoked evenly, folks, that gets compromised. And let me tell you, we have seen it over and over. You will lose the battle. I have heard people tell me, oh no, I'll try to convert them or I'll make them very godly. Never happens. Never, ever, ever, ever. I have not yet seen one that's been successful. It's always the other way around. This presents a problem. Because in this faith, if we're trying to preserve our faith, we have to think about our children. If our children don't have a definite identity in who they are, who can they marry? Let me put it in layman's term. Who can they really marry? I mean, you can go back to the house that you came from because, well, that's idolatry, right? The problem is you can't marry a Jew either because you're not Jewish. So where do you land? Where is your children going to be? Who they're going to marry? How is the legacy going to continue? What legacy at that? At this point, you need to even ask that question. What legacy am I keeping? What am I fighting for? Is that making sense? This is why this is so important. This whole aspect, 67 out of 105 verses, they have to deal with a shechut to really find that perfect bride for Isaac in connection for all the nation in the future. Why it's so important. That our faith is in alignment and that we choose the house that we're going to be in there so that we can actually preserve something. You know, one of the spectacular things about traditional Judaism is it has been preserved. I think nobody in here can argue that. Why has it been preserved? All the way up to the 1800s been preserved, right? And today it's still there, but it's more broken today, right? But it's been preserved all the way up from biblical times. You got to give it applause from biblical times all the way to the 1800s. That's a long time. Wow. But how did that happen? Because matchmaker, send me a match. And the preservation of our Mesorah, which is very important. If we don't have a Mesorah, we have nothing. Okay? It's a tradition. It's the halachic rulings, everything that encompasses the identity of being a Jew. And this is what's happening in here with Rebecca, in essence. So, I want to conclude with the words of our Chayei, because this parasha is about the life of Sarah, but she dies. It's a great, great drush in this. And I want to connect that aspect. Why in the parasha opens up with the life of Sarah, but yet immediately goes to her death? Well, we already talked about that in Rebecca we see the character of Sarah, and because Sarah was such a tzadikah, such a righteous woman, she earned that title. But most importantly, there's a hint in here that a drash that even brings this to a whole different level because it's her life, but she dies. And if we go to Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 1, it says, a good name is better than good oil, and the day of death than the day of birth. The wisest of the wisest stated in Ecclesiastes that a day of someone's death, it's much greater than the day of someone's birth. Now, I make this connection with Chayei Sarah because Chayei Sarah dies in here. But in this death, she becomes great. And we're going to see really how that plays out. I want to take us to in the Talmud, Perek 2, Daf 17, Amud Aleph. In Amud Aleph, our rabbi is expounding here something very, very beautiful. It says when Rabbi Yohanan would conclude study of the book of Job, he said the following: a person will ultimately die, and an animal will ultimately be slaughtered. Right? If you're an animal, you're going to get slaughtered one way or the other. And if you're a human being, you're going to die eventually. And all are destined to death, essentially. Therefore, death itself is not a cause for great anguish. They say here in the Gemara. The Gemara expounds that there's no anguish for death. But how is that and why is that? I'm going to continue expounding here. Rather, happy is he who grew up in Torah, whose labor is in the Torah, who gives pleasure to his Creator. In the Gemara here, it's expounding more. Why is it that Sarah's life, the title's title, Chayei Sarah, and not Mut Sarah, the death of Sarah? Why? Because the Gemara is teaching us in here that Sarah gave her life for the sake of her Creator, who was always seeking to labor in the Torah. And this is why in her death, the legacy that she leaves behind is for life, in essence. It will continue to stream through every generation. It's just amazing. It says in here, who gives up pleasure, whose labor is in the Torah, who gives pleasure to his Creator, who grew up with a good name, and who took leave of the world with a good name. That's why Ecclesiastes says a better name is better, right? A good name is better than good oil. Why good oil? Why does it mention oil, by the way, in Ecclesiastes? Let me expound on that. Because when, in the ancient biblical times, when someone would die, they would do what? They would anoint as well for fragrance, to preserve the body, so it won't decay. And the smell, the foul of an odor. Of course, you do this before you bury somebody, not after. If you know what I'm talking about. I have to throw that in. It's saying that oil that's supposed to preserve the body in the foul and the odor, says a good name is even better than that. Why? Because a good name would never rot. So, the Gemara here is really expanding more in the character of Sarah. Because the parasha opens, the title is life, but it opens with a death. You getting this? Life, but I'm going to tell you she died, by the way. That's the whole point, because it is greater. The day of death is greater than the day one is born. Such a person live his life fully, and about him, Solomon said, a good name is better than fine oil, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. Ecclesiastes 7:1, which we read. One who was faultless in life reaches the day of his death on a higher level than he was on the outset. That's why they say that the day of death is better. Because when you are born, you have no mitzvot. You have no merit at that point. But when you die, you have merit now. Hopefully. Right? That's the key. See? When you're born, you have nothing. It's almost like, you have zero money in your bank account. But when you're old and wise, you invested. Let's talk terminologies of humans so we could get this. You graduate from high school, you don't have a good portfolio in your bank account. You don't have a 401. You don't have really anything. But what happens when you retire? It's a different story, hopefully, for most of us, right? At least we have something, right? Something we can leave our children, but something that we have for us as well, right? It's the same thing. The concept in here, it's very subtle. We don't see it. It's the same concept. Someone's dead, you have merits that you have accumulated. Like Suzanne said, hopefully. That's the whole idea. Does that make sense? Rabbi Meir was wont to say the following idiom: study with all your heart and with all your soul and know my ways, and to be diligent at the doors of my Torah. Keep my Torah in your heart, and fear me should be before your eyes. Guard your mouth from all transgression, and purify and sanctify yourself from all fault and iniquity. And if you do so, I, God, will be with you everywhere. This is beautiful. Such a beautiful. This is the Becharot 17, like I said, Amud Aleph. It's really, really good. The book of Becharot, it's very, very powerful because it encompasses, and I do want to share for some of you who are not familiar with this. Becharot is a tractate in the Talmud that deals with what? Becharot has to do with faith. All that has to do with faith. The primary focus of the tractate is the myriad ways in which a Jewish person expresses his faith through his life. Now, I'm reading this because this really connects us to Chayei Sarah. That's why we're reading about the life of Sarah. The life of Sarah was infused, essentially, with Torah obedience to Hashem. She gave her life. She followed Abraham. She went out. She made souls with Abraham. And all this all encompassing in one in Jewish faith. The plethora of details with regard to the different blessings that one recites on various occasions over the course of his life. That's Berachot, the prayer services and their customs, the Shema, with all its associated blessings, and the Halachot, and numerous laws connected with a person's day-to-day existence are all comprehensively addressed in this tractate. And this is why, in essence, Becharot talks a lot about the essence of faith and the identity, folks. You have to have identity in what you do. A faith without identity is nothing. Can't base a faith when you don't have nothing to do, when there's no positive commandments for you to do. This is the aspect of understanding this. Hashem wants us to be fearful of him, to be servants of him. Remember, the three things of the world stands. One of them is the service of Hashem. Why the world is not melting today? Because there are people who are doing the service of Hashem. There are people who are feeding the hungry. There are people who are following the Torah. All this conclusively together to be whole. Sarai encompassed all that. She encapsulated all of that in one. Which is why her memory will never die. How does that work out? The parasha tells us that what? That she came into the tent, Rebecca, of Isaac or Sarah at this point, and he was consoled, right? The sages tells us that as of that very moment, that her spirit came alive. She was able, like, why? Because, there's more to this, but, the Shabbat candlelights, for one, the cloud they oversee, the ohel, all of that came back when Rebecca came into the tent. See what I mean? And that's the idea, folks. The idea is that the things that we implement today will carry on to the next generation. And the parasha concludes with the descendants of Ishmael. Think about this. Now, I want to conclude with this right here. That is right there. What happened with Ishmael? Ishmael was what? Banished. You guys remember? And it came through who? Sarah. Sarah was the one to say, Abraham, you're my sugar. You need to get rid of this guy. Hagar goes with Ishmael. They wander into the desert. They nearly die out there. An angel rescues them and helps them. Now we see something interesting. What happens at the death of Abraham is that Ishmael comes back. There's a reconciliation with Ishmael and Isaac. I know most of you don't believe that, but it's in your Tanakh. Now the genealogy of of Ishmael comes along. In other words, folks, what we see in this parasha is a whole picture. The goal at the end, what's going to happen, it says that all nations will track back to Jerusalem. As a matter of fact, the prophet, the Nevuah, Yeshayahu states that even the descendants of Ishmael in the Messianic age will be bringing fragrances to the holy temple and offerings. If you want a reference for that, I'd be more than happy to share that with you. That's the whole point. The parasha is showing the legacy that she started. It's accumulated. It's kind of hinting where what took place, what was severed, at the end will be unified again. And that's what's so beautiful about the life of Sarah. The life of Sarah bleeds into everything else, into the future. And I pray that all of us in here will have that fervency and that dedication and that love for Hashem to continue in the path of Avinu Abraham and to be a servant in his household. And a servant, remember, is not self-willed. Can't say I'm going to serve, but I'm going to do it my way. That's not a servant. That's self-willed. So this is the character building that we need to continue to work within each other in our lives. May Hashem bless you and keep you. Thank you.